Welcome to the TryPod, where we break down the NRL every game, every week from a punting perspective. I'm Jacob Wynn, that's Matteo Padonis, and this is the Round 2 punting preview. Round 1, we went 1-1 on our best bets. We also won the mixed matchup at $2.45. It is fantastic to have footy back. Round 1 had a bit of everything, which we unpacked live Sunday night, as we will every week. So you can still find that video, watch it on Facebook, YouTube, or have a listen anytime you like if you want to hear our thoughts on round 1. That's why we don't spend much time looking back on a Wednesday. It's all about looking forward, trying to find some winning bets for you in the upcoming round. And we do have 3 best bets and a mixed matchup to share with you tonight. But as I throw to you and welcome you on, Padonis, I would like to know that with only one game in the book so far this season, of the 16 teams, you evaluate them all again. Can you tell us which teams you significantly reevaluated after seeing them play last week?
For sure. Happy Wednesday, everyone out there. Hope we're all doing well. Look, I like to do my ratings and set it up, and I'd like to sort of stick and try to hold to my principles for at least a fortnight. Don't make too many drastic adjustments. But in saying that, the 2 sides that I would adjust up or down the biggest this week, so is the Knights. I've upgraded the Knights the biggest based on last week. And then the biggest downgrade, excluding obviously injuries and player news, it would be Souths.
Yeah, and obviously that's 2 ends of the spectrum. Knights, very impressive performance, and Souths massively underperformed. My biggest downgrade on performance alone would be Manly, because I thought they would have started the season stronger, and I thought they were really underwhelming. So if we're just talking, they didn't lose any key players, but just on performance, I downgrade them. And the team I'd upgrade the most on how impressed I was is Brisbane. Did I underestimate some of their key positional players like Pat Carrigan, even what Albert Kelly could bring to the halves? We'll talk about Brisbane in just a moment, but overall their grit looks legit. We don't want to overreact to round 1, to your point, but we also have to take notice. I give you credit for you actually picked Brisbane at close to $3 odds to make the 8. I think they're already closer to 50-50. Now we're going to dive into the round, but you guys know what happens first. Best bets. Let's get straight into it. I just said I downgrade Manly. I was not impressed what I saw in the season opener, and yet they'll be our first best bet of round 2. We're taking the Manly Seagulls plus half a try. They face the Sydney Roosters at the SCG. Now that bet plus half a try is under the tries handicap. That is $1.85 on Bet365. Next best is on Top Sport, and it's called full-time tries. You'll find it there. And this is me feeling that I think Manly's cop criticism. It's in fact going to be 8 days, a fairly long turnaround for them, just copping criticism and being told that they can't compete with the other contenders. I still think a guy like Tom Trbojevic is so hard to keep caged up, and you're expecting that to happen in back-to-back weeks if you're liking the Roosters. These are 2 teams in the Roosters and the Seagulls that both looked bad in round 1, but I've got an excuse for Manly. They played the Premiers, whereas the Roosters didn't play that great of a side and still looked second best. The other reason that the Roosters did badly in week 1 is because they admittedly were underdone. Well, I'm not convinced that's going to change a great deal in 6 days. So even though I think the Roosters are definitely the better team for 2022, I think Manly has more urgency, and I think that especially catching plus half a try, even a narrow loss, we could still have a winning ticket. Anything to add to that, Padonis?
Yeah, just to echo your sentiments there, Jacob, we think the Manly forward pack steps up, creates the momentum, and will create a platform for Turbo and the playmakers to build off. And the other thing let's mention is that the Roosters are in one of the biggest look-ahead spots that exist, looking at South next week in the Joey Manu revenge game.
Yeah, good point there. Next up, and I can already hear people squirming and crying, some tortured cries coming out there among the pod followers, but we're taking the New Zealand Warriors plus 5.5 in the first half. It's $1.95 on Bet365. Next best price, $1.88 on Ladbrokes and Nets. So yes, the Warriors again. Yes, first half again. But I really believe there's been a market overreaction in a game where we have 2 teams that, let's be honest, they both showed some flashes, Gold Coast and New Zealand last week, and they both showed some flaws in round 1 as well. Now the Titans may get back Brimson. He may return to the team. They deserve to be favourites. They're at home. That's fine. But New Zealand, are they being counted out because they've lost Sean Johnson and they've lost some other outside backs? Because I think they've got pretty good backline depth. I think they've got some good halves depth. Like bringing in Ash Taylor, he's not going to be intimidated. This is an opponent he knows very well And you do get Reece Walsh and Matt Lodge both returning from suspension, which bolsters the Warriors. I think they're absolutely in this. I don't think they were that far away from the Dragons. Later on, I'll make the case that the Titans weren't that close to Para, not as close as the score suggested in some ways. Now, the full game line is Warriors plus 8.5, but I just slightly favour the halftime line because it's 40 minutes. It's half the scoring. The points are virtually twice as valuable. Anything to add on that one?
Yeah, to follow on from that, we think the Warriors, other side here, they sort of generally play the Titans well. The Gold Coast were gifted some opportunities last week against Parramatta, had a lot of easy field position. We don't think it'll be all that easy, and it's not that easy in the NRL to repeat 2 weeks in a row. So Sexton looked great, but how will he fare this week? So we think the Warriors keep the game close. Let's roll with the first half.
And third and final best bet this week, we're going to take the Broncos minus 1.5 at $1.85. That's on Dabble. You can copy that best bet straight out of my bet slip. So at Jacob Wynn on Dabble, and no other bookie has that over $1.80. So the next best, if you can't get on that for our Kiwi followers, I'm sorry, but the next best would be to jump to the $2 line on Ladbrokes and Neds, but you're laying 3.5. But best bet minus 1.5. Brisbane, we may be on the square side here, but I'm going to argue that we're getting out in front of it, and this line may have further to move. But why do you like the Broncos so much, Matheos?
Yeah, so the Broncos are my favourite play of the round, and we think it's a good opportunity to take a team that appears to be on the up. They get their star signing back in his first game in Reynolds, and they can build on last week's performance. Despite winning, the Dogs were very underwhelming in that result, and I think that the win is sort of masking some of those problems, and maybe the market hasn't moved far enough. We think the Broncos will expose that, so we have to take them as a small favourite with the start.
I totally agree. I think, yes, everyone is probably going to think that pick's popular, but sometimes it is that simple, to be honest. And the same reasons that we questioned how good the Bulldogs were over the last 2 weeks, I still question it. And you haven't won me over because you won a slugfest in horrible conditions in Townsville against the Cowboys team that I don't rate too highly. So those are our 3 best bets. But we've got breakdowns on all 8 games, of course, and a mixed matchup to come. Before we share those, we're going to jump in with our show sponsor and hear what the market's doing from our frenemy, Tristan.
G'day TryPod family, it's Tristan Merlihan here from Top Sport. The first week of the NRL's done and dusted, and we're into week 2 with the games kicking off tomorrow night. So one of the biggest takeaways from the week just gone were the way the scores all, or not all, but majoritively went under the line. So 6 out of the 8, I think, covered the unders. One, depending on what number you got, may have been unders as well. And even the Parramatta Titans game, there was a stack of points in that first half, but then it slowed right down late. So that was an interesting thing. So our trading team, we've had a bit of a chat, and we do think the numbers have to be scaled down a touch, but obviously it's only one weekend. So we've got to constantly move that, whether it was just a case of first round of the season and potentially teams not having all their combinations in place, or whether it's a combination of that and the new rules. But that's something we'll just have to monitor as we go through. Probably the team that we've probably looked at and reevaluated would be the Knights. They were very well supported to run last and finish down the bottom of the table in the lead up to the season. They, out of all the teams, they were the team that was seemingly undervalued where we had them originally priced, and they put in a really, really good effort. So as a result, we've had to rethink that. Obviously, they've got to come back and do it again, but they do get the perfect opportunity taking on the Tigers, who were one of the favourite teams for the wooden spoon. So if they can go away and get a result there, they'll be in a good spot to continue their form. The Broncos obviously also overperformed, but I think there was an expectation they were going to improve, so we haven't really changed too much of a thought process there. The 2 biggest line moves have been that the 2 Queensland teams, the Titans have gone from 5.5 to 8.5, have been well backed. Obviously, it's a combination of Sean Johnson out, Brimson likely coming back into the side for the Titans, and then the Broncos have gone 1.5 out to 2.5 over that key number where they were impressive. Adam Reynolds back this week. The Bulldogs obviously got a win as well, but maybe weren't as impressive on that similar sort of wavelength as the Bronx. So that one has moved, and there's been a good steady stream of money for both of those. One of the unique markets we offered this year, or the first round, were the player performance markets for the NRL, which is the first time we've done that. And it was, good activity. Plenty of punters got involved. It's based on tries, try assists, line breaks, number of metres gained, and also tackles. So make sure you check it out. They come up on game day on every single one of those. We may have got the numbers wrong in that first game. We got a little bit of lucky with Turbo not having a great game, but from then on it was we're very comfortable with where we set them. So it'll be interesting to see how that movement and how the betting activity goes on those markets throughout the course of the year. All right, good luck. Enjoy the week ahead and gamble responsibly.
That is something fun I was going to ask you about, Padonis. This is like the kind of bets that a lot of people love betting on American sports, betting player props, whether it's NFL betting yards or catches, or if it's NBA betting points or rebounds. Now you can do it with the NRL. And I noticed TopSport put these up season opener last week, and you could bet Tom Trbojevic, and I think he came out at 41.5, and you get like a point for every point scored, and you get a point for every 8-meter run, and line breaks and line break assists and all the rest, right? And within a few minutes, I noticed that wasn't $1.90 each side; it was into $1.50 to the over. And Sportsbet had put the identical market up at 49.5. So because it's new, there's uncertainty. The bookies aren't even sure what to do with it. Now, Turbo ended up having a quiet game, so the people that smashed that number over actually came up on the wrong side of it. But there were others that cashed throughout the weekend. But that's one to keep an eye on. I feel like that could be a whole pod or a whole podcast segment trying to pick certain players. And that's where we start to overlap with a bit of fantasy NRL and a bit of Supercoach, which I am in a crossover show, Winning Mood. Give that a plug. But did you catch any of those player performance markets, Matthias? Did you run your eye over any of them?
No, I didn't run over any of those last week. Definitely saw the markets come up. A few of the guys sort of messaged me saying, "What do you think? Have a look at them." But not really something that I've looked into. And as you said, it's like a whole time period just can be consumed by that. So at the moment, I'm just sort of focused on trying to handicapping the teams and try to get my bearings on the season. And then maybe we can delve into that as we go if something really stands out. But I think for now, we'll just stick to lines and totals.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, it is its own specialization, but we're just giving a heads up to our followers. Like, if you're interested in that, just go and have a look at those. They may not be up early in the week, certainly, but within a few hours of kickoff, you might find some value hidden in there for sure. Okay, let's jump into the games, and we begin round 2 with the Storm in their home opener against the Rabbitohs, and the Rabbitohs are an 8.5-point underdog. This is Bellamy's 500th NRL game in charge, and he will be without Jennings, Brandon Smith, and Christian Welsh. All had bad injuries last week. In come Eremea, Munster, Harry Grant, and Jesse Bromwich. So you've got some decent reinforcements, as do Souths getting back Latrell, who will slot in at fullback, and Johnston will move to the wing. What do you make of this one?
So to me, the Storm were resilient and gritty last week and coming back with only one player left on their bench. And now they do face a much tougher opponent in last year's grand final, South, albeit off a pretty poor round 1 loss. We all know Bellamy loves milestones, so the 500th game will appeal to the players, and I'm sure that they'll lift for him. But to me, all the talk continues to be about the loss of Adam Reynolds, even though he hasn't been there all preseason. Everyone knew last year he wasn't going to be there. And I think that this narrative has sort of played into the spread a bit here. I don't make the gap between these two teams this large, especially with some of the problems that the Storm have and some of the injury concerns that they experienced last week. I think Latrell Mitchell returns, which is a massive gain. I think Alex Johnson last week was forced to be a creator where he's a finisher. I think Mitchell provides that game-breaking ability. And for all those people that have a knock on him that say that he might be underdone or have he's sort of lacking match sharpness, the same could be said for Munster and Harry Grant as well on the other side with their first games of the season as well. I think Brendan Smith and Welsh being out, I think this drastically weakens their forward rotation. And I can't remember looking at a Storm team where they had such a weak bench in the past. So I sort of do feel that this is an advantage to South. And as the game goes on, the South's forward pack can get on top. So I know that Melbourne have a tough home field and they can score points from anywhere, which makes them a scary team to bet against. But I'd actually lean South in this game. And I sort of tried to get you over the line, but I think this was one of the ones where you didn't really support that notion. But I think the other factor as well, that South have a brutal schedule ahead of them with the Roosters and Penrith the next 2 weeks. So I think they're staring at a real possibility of an 0-4 hole. So I think they're going to be super focused and committed to try and get a win to get their season started. So that's sort of my takes on the game. What about you?
I totally agree with that part. So, not worried yet. But as you say, they're at the Storm in Bellamy's 500th game, then Roosters, then Penrith. They are staring down the barrel of 0-4. And if they're 0-4 after a month, we do start to get a little bit worried about our Rabbitohs top 8 that's in 2 of our preseason multis. So, I mean, hopefully they can find a win in one of these next 3, give themselves a chance, but it's going to be tough. Now, if there's a positive for the Souths, they can be pretty thankful that the Storm did lose a couple of international level middle forwards. And of course, Kamikamica's not in this squad either. But Melbourne is probably just as strong this week as they were last week when you look at the guys that I just mentioned before that are going to be included. Now, you did like Souths, and I have kind of vetoed that. I just cannot quite go against Melbourne in this one. I do think home opener, when the comp was relocated last year as well, so Melbourne haven't played an NRL game in Melbourne for quite some time, so I think that will give them a big boost. And the other thing is I can't be sure that Souths are going to turn it around from last week because, yeah, the effort will be there. Yeah, it'll be a good forward battle. Absolutely. Latrell being outside Walker adds a whole new dimension to the Rabbits' attack, especially their left side attack. But at the end of the day, look at the Storm side and you got Harry Grant, Jerome Hughes, you got Munster, who's not only off the drink, talking about whether he'll be sharper, but he's somewhat looking for redemption after his off season. And Pappy, I just don't want to bet against that after they had a slow start last week. I could easily see the Storm winning this one well too. So I just don't have that confidence. So I can't get on board with you there. Moving to Friday, the Dragons host the Panthers at Jubilee. Panthers are 10.5-point road favourites. Both of these teams lost a prop in round 1. The Dragons lost Aaron Woods. Molo comes onto the starting side and Burgess to the bench. And Leota got injured for the Panthers. Lenu will start and Eisenhuth to the bench. What do you think?
So the Panthers, they started off right where they left off last year with an unbelievable performance last week on the opener against Manly. And now they get an extended turnaround and get to face what is arguably the most public team of the preseason. It's sort of carried into week 2, I think. The Dragons themselves started the season well with a win against the Warriors, which I think had some question marks about it. But that's another thing we can talk about in the Warriors game. I think that'll help settle their nerves with all their young players. And like the Dragons to me look like they're going to be a confidence team this season, and their form can fluctuate quite a bit up or down depending on how that confidence is throughout the year. The Dragons have nothing to lose, obviously, coming into this. And I struggle to see how their forward pack sort of matches up with what Penrith can do. And then what sort of space and opportunities will we see for the likes of Amon and Sloan in that scenario? So from that point of view, it's pretty limited. So I could only lean the Panthers because I feel that the line might be a bit light. But my one reservation, I guess, and that's keeping me off, is that everyone is applauding how good they looked without Cleary. But we all know that the NRL is not that simple and it's not as easy as that. And there's a reason why Sean O'Sullivan has had 4 clubs in 5 seasons. So we may see some regression from him. And then if that's the case, I don't want to have laying double digits in my pocket. But that's the only way I could look. But it's enough reasons for me just to stay off the game.
We missed an opportunity last week because we both leaned to Penrith and we didn't take them as a best bet. But one of those reasons was I just questioned whether Penrith could begin the 2022 season with that premiership level intensity. And then on Thursday night, they answered that question. And to a degree, that's just how they play. They create immense pressure for their opponent. But they did enjoy a bit of a boost of playing in front of those home fans. And Manly was very subpar and put pressure on themselves with their completions too. So is Penrith going to replicate that intensity? If I knew that, I would lay 10.5 with them because they should be too classy for the Dragons. But the Dragons have got, as you say, they're a confidence side, but they've got a bit of confidence and there were some positive signs that they want to play positive footy, as we saw up on the sunny coast against the Warriors last week. If Penrith puts them under pressure and has them in a vice grip like they often do with opponents, then those young playmakers for the Dragons will struggle. So this line does feel pretty high for a Dragon side that's very competent. And I do think that Penrith really wants to prove a point that they're not a one-man team and they are relishing the fact that they're performing well without Cleary. And everyone else in the spine stepping up, Edwards, Luai, Coruscant, and I kind of include the lock forward in the spine these days as well. He's such a big playmaker. They all look great, and O'Sullivan was very capable last week. So I didn't feel like either of these teams was jumping out at me. That's why I'll move on to the next game where one side did jump out at me. We'll explore that a little bit more with the blockbuster Friday night. Roosters, Seagulls at the SCG, and the Seagulls are slight underdogs at plus 1.5 points. But we're taking a best bet of plus half a try, which is significantly better. You could lose a game by 2. You could even lose a game by 4 and still have the same number of tries. And again, that's $1.85 on 365. To set the table, the Roosters are unchanged from the side that lost quite convincingly at this venue last week. That's despite the fact Radley and Smith both went off with HIAs, but they are both named to start again this week. I'd monitor Radley. I think the concussion is not an issue, but it seemed like he might have picked up a neck complaint last week. But he is named to start. Manly boost their team with bringing back Dylan Walker, and he's going to play utility role off the bench. Now, before I get your thoughts, in fact, Padonis, we're going to throw to the only tipster involved in this show who's still undefeated so far in 2022. Please just slide over a little bit if you can,
Hey
mate.
guys, Robbie Farah back again this week for round 2. Great to see us get off to a winning start last week with my underdog bet of the week. The Dragons getting up. Quick shout out to Jacob, who took on my bet and backed the Warriors, mate. Unlucky Jacob, better luck next time. But looking forward to round 2. There's some great games this week, and my underdog bet of the week is the Seagulls to beat the Roosters. I think the Roosters are going to start the season with 2 losses back-to-back. I think the Seagulls can bounce back after their loss to Penrith last week and get the chocolates against the Roosters this week. So that's my underdog bet of the week. If you're keen for a bet on the NRL, download Dabble, get on there, have some fun, copy some bets, have some banter with your friends. Cheers, guys. See you next week.
And the sign-up code for Dabble is TryPod. If you want to join Bobby Farah and see his tips and myself and the Padonis. Last week, for example, our best bet was Raiders plus 1.5. But Ladbrokes don't let me get at those juicy $2 NRL lines. So I was happy to back the Raiders at just $1.98. So I backed that on Dabble because that's still a value play to me. So it's not necessarily all our best bets, although we have a best bet with them tonight, but it's also some extra good bets. As for Robbie, strictly speaking, the Dragons weren't an underdog last week, but since it was basically pick 'em, I'm happy to give him that one. And Theos, if you keep a spreadsheet of our side bets this year, please keep a column of any time we disagree with Robbie, and you can mark him 1-0 so far against us because he picked the Dragons. We did like the Warriors. Now, this week he likes the Seagulls, so we're in agreement. But how do you see this game?
Yeah, so to me, these were the 2 poorest performing teams from round 1, and they will both be desperate to avoid an 0-2 hole. At this stage of the season, I believe Manly are the more settled side with less uncertainty with their playmakers. And if we were going to knock Manly, then let's talk about the performance of their forward pack. So last week was pretty underwhelming, and it's appeared to be a consistent trend against all the big teams. And there's a lot of negative pressure being laid on Turbo for not performing in these big games. But I think the underlying cause is that when they lose the forward battle, they get dominated in the ruck. They can't take advantage of quick play the balls. And what else do you expect Tom to be able to do? Like, he's not a miracle worker. So from that point of view, yes, it's a fundamental element of the game, and it doesn't allow Turbo to get a foothold as much as he'd like. So I think this week, everyone's talking about how poor they perform. So I think the Manly pack will step up and aim up here in the middle. I think Kiri and Walker, when you look at the Roosters, they're still taking some time to gel. There's a bit of uncertainty around Victor Radley, whether he does pass his HIA or not. There's still some conjecture there, even though he's been named in the starting lineup. And look, the Roosters do have a shuffled and a sort of a newish back line. Like Joe Manu played wing last week, so how that's going to fare week 2, not sure that they'll correct that straight away. I was prepared to sort of pass the game, even though I leaned Manly because the Roosters did lose, so they'll still be sort of committed. But what got me over the line was the fact that they are in one of the biggest look-ahead spots that exist with that rivalry against Souths. And I'm sure all off-season, everyone had this game circled for Joey Manu to sort of get some revenge over Latrell Mitchell. And after Thursday night's game last week, I was sort of hoping the Roosters would win and win well, because then I was hoping we'd get a line of like 4.5 or 5.5. But even still, I was sort of on the fence, but I leaned Manly. You got me over the line. And that's the beauty of having 2 minds now in this pod, that we can sort of put our heads together. And then if we both sort of lean aside, then we can give it out with some confidence to the public and the community. So let's back Manly. Let's hope they can kickstart their season.
And the other thing is, even if we're on the fence, the market ultimately dictates what our best bets are as well. And finding plus half a try is a pretty good value way to play a 1.5 point underdog. You can't always find that $1.85. So that is, on its own right, on any team that's a slight underdog, that's a good bet, especially if you like the slight underdog. And just as you said, this is a team that had their manhood questioned all week about whether they can compete with contenders. Well, let's take them here. You get that mini edge of the couple extra days prep as well, which is really, at this time of the year, not huge, but it's 2 extra days. Hearing those criticisms, and time to prove them wrong. I'm looking forward to see it. And it's always fun being on Tommy Turbo, still the best player on the planet. Moving to Saturday, the Titans host the Warriors. Another game we've got a best bet. The line 8.5 everywhere. Our best bet, Warriors plus 5.5 in the first half, $1.95. Now that's 365. It's basically the same thing as plus 4.5, but the price you get on that's $1.88. So that's why I like the 5.5 there. Good price. As we've said, Brimson is named to return. Assume he will return for the Titans, and Smith will move back to the bench. The Titans attack wasn't the issue last week, to be fair, whereas the Warriors do have a bit of a decent reshuffle here. So we've got Johnson, Wattenis Lesniak, Valea all out, Walsh, Pompey, Arthur's in, Harris Tavita slides to 6, Ash Taylor comes in, which adds some extra intrigue. Funny how these things work out. He's playing his first game for the Warriors against his old club at his old club's home ground. Cody Nikorima out for now, and then Lodge returns to the pack, which I think is big too. I believe he's off suspension from losing his head in the game against the Titans. These two teams didn't meet that long ago. It was the final round of the season where the Titans flogged the Warriors, but the stakes are a bit more evenly matched. Both of these teams are pretty keen to not fall to 0-2 in this one. Now, Padonis, you had your first experience of having a best bet on the pod, lose with the Warriors. That's all part of your initiation. But are you happy that we're doing it again?
So again, this is another one. Caveat, I was on the fence. Jacob got me over the line. We both sort of felt that the inclusion of Walsh and Lodge are huge for this side because they were clearly lacking some spark and aggression last week. The market has overcorrected to Johnson's injury, and the rugby league gods are smiling on Ash Taylor. Gets to face his former club. Bit of extra motivation there. I think he can fill the void serviceably. I do think the Titans were gifted some opportunities last week, as we touched on in the Sunday recap. If you haven't listened to that, you can go back and check it out. But the Eels did make 5 errors inside their own 20-metre line in that first half. We don't think that those opportunities will come as easy for the Titans this week. And yes, they're a deserving favourite, but at that price point, 8.5, it's a little bit too big. And don't forget, the Warriors were winning 16-12, and they did bomb a try in the corner to go 22-12 up. And then how would this line look if the Warriors did end up winning? So I think it's a good opportunity. Let's go with the Warriors, and they're the rightful dog here.
Yeah, like people do overreact to round one, but they just overreact to the final score. But the truth of both these games was that Warriors-Dragons game was pretty tight, and the Dragons just got the better of them late. And that Parramatta-Titans game, look, we made the case the Titans did get dudded, and that's the narrative that's come out of round one, that the Titans could have easily beaten Parramatta. And in one sense, that is true. But in another sense, if the Parramatta had not made so many first half errors, Parramatta would have been leading the game by 2 or 3 tries at half time, and it could have been curtains, and Parra could have won comfortably. So as much as you can give the Titans credit for how good their attack looked on Sunday, they were just as every bit as disappointing in defense. So I feel like both these sides are incomplete. Both these sides are knock on the door of the top 8 type teams. And it's just too many points in what I think is a competitive and, as I said before, intriguing afternoon encounter. So got us across the line. We're going to be taking the Warriors in the first half again. So come out and play, Warriors. Moving later, Saturday, the Sharks host the Eels in a twilight game. The Eels are a -2.5 road favourite. The Eels are the favourite. This is another big home opener because the Sharkies return to Shark Park after it's been renovated. I don't think they've played there for the last 2 years. And their new head coach should actually be in attendance for this one. Cronulla has named the same 1-17 that went down narrowly to Canberra last week. Possibility of McInnes and Tracy being in the mix. They're on the reserves, so we'll wait and see. Doubtful that McInnes would be ready this early based on earlier reports. Parramatta lost Sean Russell, their winger, and Locke Madison to injuries, but they'd get to select Opachik, Nathan Brown, and Bryce Cartwright. What do you think?
So all preseason and including last week's pod, we've been pretty firm in our position that hold on, the Sharks will be good, but they'll improve into the year. And we did think they'll start slow. With a new game plan and new halves, it will take time for those combinations to form. And I didn't see any evidence last week against Canberra to sort of suggest that this will change from a week-to-week basis. Graham and McInnes are still big outs, and they face an even better forward pack now in the Eels than what they did last week. And Parramatta should be able to control where the game takes place, in my opinion. What I like also is that despite winning last week, the Eels were pretty down on themselves. given the way that they did let the Titans back into the game, and hearing both the press conferences last week and some of the player thoughts, there'll be a big focus on the intensity, ball handling, especially, and their defense this week. So I think the Eels, from that point of view, is still pretty underrated in the market, and they are the superior team. The Sharks are back at home though in their new stadium. After 2 years, so it's the only way that's sort of stopping me from sort of betting on them. And we would expect an uptick in performance. And I'd make this game -4, so I could only look towards the Eels, but there's enough reasons to sort of hold me away from that. What did you take?
I feel pretty much the same way, that I would lean to the Eels. I do think they're clearly better, but I do have a concern over the emotional lift that the Sharks will get from playing in front of a packed out home crowd. And I can't help but think that could bleed into the refereeing, especially when you got the Eels well publicized for getting friendly calls last week. And now you can just kind of imagine that the atmosphere is going to feed Cronulla as well. So I especially wouldn't go near the Eels, in the first half. If I was going to play Parramatta, I may play them in the second half. But all the reasons that I doubted the Sharks in the last 2 weeks in the season preview and also in round one, still remain true for me. Hines is not a natural 7. You mentioned no Graham, no McInnes, and it's a new regime. So it's Parramatta or pass for me, but not enough value to be sure it's a best bet. Later on Saturday night, North Queensland remain at home, and they're going to play host to the Canberra Raiders, who are 4.5-point favourites. Tanoa Brown is injured for the Cowboys, so the fiery redhead Neem will join the Cowboys pack, at least via the bench. The Raiders have to name their third choice halfback, which is Matt Frawley, after Schneider, who got it, I think it was his second start last week, basically a rookie halfback. He's come down with COVID. Plus, they lose their starting hooker in Hodgson, who was injured very early last week. Starling will now start, and they're going to debut a young fella, Trevelyan, off the bench. What do you think of this one?
So even though we had the Raiders last week as our best bet, and they did win for us, the beauty about being a handicapper is that we're not always married to one opinion and have to stick to the sides that we liked the week before, and that can change week to week. So if I put my non-subjective hat on, I was disappointed with the Raiders on balance on how they did perform last week, and it was another game where they did fail to put in a full 80 minutes. Schneider, I thought, did okay. Now they have to go with another halves combination in Frawley. I think Starling loses his effectiveness when he does play a full game rather than have that sort of impact style role. And now they have to travel to Townsville and play in unfamiliar conditions and humidity. The Cowboys did go down in heartbreaking fashion against the Dogs, having celebrated the match winner only for it to be taken away by the bunker for that offside. And I'm still low on their forward pack and think they're pretty poor in general. And the Raiders side is better than what they faced last week in the Dogs. So from that point of view, I would lean Canberra, but then what's sort of stopping me from getting over that line there is that the line has sort of moved already from what it was last week. And are we sure that the Cowboys won't at least lift and have some intensity, because they don't want to go 0-2, having 2 home games already, knowing that the poorer teams in the NRL generally like to start well and then they taper off if they have a losing record. So from that point of view, I'd have to pass the game, unfortunately.
I think the sharp side has to be the Cowboys, because the truth of the matter is both of these sides, North Queensland and Canberra, played very close games in round one and went down to the wire. But we all know the Raiders won and the Cowboys lost. But the truth is, it could have easily been the other way around. So I think that there's an overreaction just purely from playing the results. The issue is, though, that there's cases to be made for the Raiders. You kind of touched on that. Like, we've come into the season probably thinking the Raiders are a little bit better than what most people realize. And we've said that the Cowboys could actually be as bad as everyone thinks. So I'm convinced that the Raiders should be favored in this one. Now, the Raiders nearly blew a double-digit lead last week, and I was not that impressed, especially with our best bet on them. And I think they are limited, and it's not ideal to have to change halfback again and to lose Hodgson. But I also factor in that they blew a double-digit lead, Canberra did, at Queensland Country Bank Stadium last year. They were up, I think they were up like 16 or 18 points against the Cowboys before the Cowboys came home and got them. So I feel like you'll get no complacency for this trip for Canberra. They'll be switched on if you're backing the Raiders. But I do not discount the fact that the Cowboys are under a lot of pressure and are still at home and do take advantage of the conditions, not necessarily expecting the heavens to open, but talking about that humidity. So when you've got cases you can make for both teams, you usually don't have a super strong bet. Let's move on to Sunday, where the Knights host the Tigers in Newcastle. The visitors are +7.5. And the Knights have named the same side that pulled off the biggest upset of round one. There is a chance Daniel Saifiti could be added to that team. The Tigers will get back an experienced prop in James Tarmow. Both sides impressed last week. The Knights impressed for 80. The Tigers impressed us all, I think, for at least 50. But how do you see this one?
Yeah, so the Knights had the best result of the round last week by winning by 14 points as a 13.5 underdog. So that was a 26-point swing against the spread. And we're not suddenly going to see the Knights play like that each week, but we have a scenario now where the Knights are public darlings, and they've played. And if they played most other teams this week, I'd probably be looking to fade the Knights. But the problem is that they're facing the Tigers, who I think you will both lower on them this season than the rest of the market. So even though the line has moved from the 4.5 look ahead, it's still at a level that matches what my ratings are. So I don't feel like there's any value in taking the Tigers. And the Tigers did beat the Knights twice last season, and many will expect them to be competitive again. But the fact that Ponga missed both those games against the Tigers last year, so he adds an extra element there. And they do look a lot stronger across the field and have a lot more strike power than the Tigers. So for those reasons, I could only look to lay the Knights at the minus. But as we said, for the reasons I just touched on with the spread moving from what it was and the fact that they had such a good performance, I don't feel like we're getting any value by taking the Knights.
Yeah, you make a good point there. Like sometimes two teams that you might be looking to fade in an upcoming round play each other. And then what do? Or two teams that I really want to bet against. I really want to bet on them next week. If they play against somebody else that you want to be on as well, because two teams are underrated or both teams are overrated, it negates the advantage that you might have. So again, it's less like you're going to find a best bet. And you make a great point there about the Tigers beating the Knights twice. That includes an upset they did pull in Newcastle. I think the Knights will especially remember that. And in general, they still are always stronger when they're in the Hunter region, and they will want to take this opportunity to start the year strong. It's a great opportunity. You're a $1.33 favourite to be 2-0 and begin a season really well after a lot of off-season doubts. So both these sides impressed last week, which means it's hard to get a lot of value on them the following week. But let's also remember, like, how impressive was Newcastle last week? The Roosters were terrible, and two of the tries were very fortuitous. And how good were the Tigers last week? Everyone's saying they were really good. Look, they outperformed expectation. But the Storm were very unlucky with the major injuries and disruption they had to their lineup. The truth of the matter is, although this is the Channel 9 Sunday Arvo primetime game, this could be a bottom four battle. And the Knights are rightfully solid favourites, but I don't see value with the line getting as steep as it is. Now, speaking of the game maybe not being that glamorous, it doesn't mean you can't enjoy it. You can be like Zane Sims, who won an NRL jersey last week, one of the two that we gave away thanks to our sponsors. And how Zane won that jersey was he picked Phil Sammy to score the last try in the Channel 9 Sunday Arvo game last week. And that's all you need to do this week. So you need to comment the name of the last try scorer for Knights Tigers and the minute that they're going to score. Now, that minute is only a tiebreaker. Zane last week was wrong by 30 minutes, and he picked a winger, and he still won the jersey. So it goes to show you definitely have a shot if you can get close. So you can comment that on YouTube or Facebook and on this show or the Winning Mood show as well. It's one guess per person per post, so you can actually have 4 shots if you like. Winning Mood is live tonight at 8:30 Sydney time. Last game, and a fun one, I reckon, and we do have a best bet, as you know. The Dogs host the Broncos at Accor Stadium, which is the old ANZ. Over 80,000 capacity. It should be full of 80,000 Dog fans after the win last week. Now they've got a winning record. They welcome back Tavita Pangai Jr., faces his old club. Several players were off the field for HIA and Townsville for the Dogs, but they're all named to play Sunday night. For Brisbane, of course, the biggest change is bringing in the club captain for his debut, Adam Reynolds. Albert Kelly will partner him in the halves while Walters moves to the bench. And Tessie New, back from injury, is taking straight over from Azarko's fullback spot. Now, in the last couple of years, these two sides have been cellar dwellers. This year, it's true. Statistically, these are the best two defenses in the comp, averaging only 4 points each against. and one of them's going to be 2-0. So you reckon it'll be the Broncos, Matthias?
I do reckon it'll be the Broncos. And for those people in our Facebook group, this has actually been the game that's caused the most discussion and conjecture over the last 24 hours. And at the top of the show, you sort of touched on what teams we sort of had the biggest adjustments to, and you had the Broncos as yours. I'll give myself a pat on the back there because I didn't have the Broncos as an upgrade because I already had them that high before round one. I sort of felt that they were coming to the season a little bit underrated and it could be stronger.
So you should have twisted my arm harder, and we should have been on Brisbane plus 10.5 last week.
Sorry, everyone. I'll make it up.
That's one we left in the chamber. Yeah, no doubt he will.
But the Broncos were super impressive last Friday. They get an extended turnaround against the Dogs, who, as we said, despite their win, was sort of pretty underwhelming. We get to see star signing Adam Reynolds make his first appearance. And even though the Broncos performed well without him, I think there's still massive improvement in what this side can do with him there. And yes, his influence will grow as the season gets deeper. But if we look last week, there was quite a few opportunities that they sort of missed. And their end of sets still look to me a little bit disjointed, that he could sort of correct that instantly. The Broncos do feel like a different side this year, and they have a different edge to them compared to past years. And I really feel like this is an opportunity where Kevin Walters can band everyone together and they can go on a bit of a run over the next few games because they got Dogs, Cowboys, and Warriors. So if they can start well against some of the fellow bottom teams from the last few years, that sort of puts their season on a good foothold. I think had the Cowboys have won, this line would probably have touched the 4 to 4.5. So I think we're getting a little bit of an edge because the Dogs did sort of hold on and win that game. The Broncos have a few matchup advantages. I do expect the Dogs to be a little bit better. And we did say last week we sort of cautioned betting on a home team for the first time in like 6 to 12 months since everyone relocated. But I feel like the Dogs' attack is still limited. The Cowboys couldn't really expose some of the flaws we think the Dogs have, but we think the Broncos can. I'd play this up to -4. That's where I sort of made the line. So at -1.5, it's a great line on Dabble. Jacob, you sort of agree?
Yeah, and to clean up what you said, you cautioned against betting against a home team in like a home opener because you can't account for in the value is that extra emotional lift. And it comes through in energy, it comes through in like the atmosphere, it maybe even comes through in referee influence. So it's a real thing. But I do think Brisbane overcomes that. I think they've got a real edge and grit about them. And look, the first thing I want to acknowledge, and as well as the fact that the Undertaker, who's 7-3 so far this season, doing really well with his free plays, you can follow him on Dabble as well. He came out and tipped the Bulldogs plus 2.5 as one of his best bets for this round. And he did meet a lot of resistance. And we don't usually weigh in on those arguments till we share our thoughts. So if you're watching the pod, that's the first place you're hearing my thoughts or the Padonis' thoughts for the upcoming round. So I didn't use his pick to bias me one way or another. I'm not deliberately going against the Undertaker, and he's gone plus 2.5. We're laying -1.5. So maybe Brisbane will win by 2. We'll both win our bets. But the truth is, I agree. We're on the public side. You got Brisbane. It's really obvious. They beat the grand finalists from last year. They held them to 4 points, and they didn't even have their captain or $1 million recruit. So that's impressive. Now, the Dogs held somebody to 4 points last week, but it was the lowly Cowboys in a monsoon. Nobody's really impressed by that, especially not your casual fans. So I know everyone's going to be on Brisbane here, but I still think the line's too low. So I just want to jump on it before it moves any further. I think the Bulldogs are similar to what we've said about Cronulla. New faces, new regime. You're going to take a bit longer to improve and to find your best footy. Whereas Brisbane just looked really good last week. And on the back of what you said, with the Cowboys in their next game at home and the following week playing New Zealand in Redcliffe, we could be sitting here after a month and we could be saying Souths are 0-4 and Brisbane are 4-0. How crazy is that? So call me square, but I'll be with my mates Jimmy and Joe down the pub. We'll all be backing the Broncos. As I say, I think that line will get to 4 or even 4.5 by kickoff. And we're going to lean into that best bet for our mixed matchup as well. So the mixed matchup this week is the Manly Sea Eagles, which remember was our first best bet of the round, to score more points than the Bulldogs. And that is paying $2, a flat $2, and you can have up to 200 on that on Top Sport. This feels too easy. We're picking on the Dogs again, and they only scored 6 points last week. And isn't that the beauty of the mixed matchup? Like, yeah, the Raiders won and scored 24, but the Raiders only scored a try with 2 minutes to go. The Raiders could have easily lost 19-18. So you could have had the Raiders losing and the Dogs winning, but our mixed matchup of Raiders to beat the Dogs would have still won. And of course, if you follow our advice and you want to put more than 200 on, a mixed matchup. Well, the Raiders went over their team total last week, and the Dogs went well under their team total last week. So we kind of steered you into 2 correct picks there as well. But the beauty of the mixed matchup is we don't have to get both these picks correct. We just need to be more right about the one, and then we are wrong about the other. So anything to add on our mixed matchup for this week, Padonis? Manly to outscore Canterbury.
Yeah, so just on that, I feel that we're getting a good spot there with the Dogs, because I feel that with the way the results went last week, the total will drop even further. And when I say total, I mean the match total. So I think the Dogs team total will only come down from what it is now. I think it was 18.5 early in the week, and now it's at 17.5. So if you like the mixed matchup, you'll probably be in a scenario where if the line hits 4.5, the Dogs team total might be at 15.5 or 16. Juice to the over. So that's probably a good way to get there. We think Manly can score 3 tries against the Roosters. We've touched on that, their firepower, that they should be able to get a platform this week. And that's a great mixed matchup. Let's go 2-0.
Yeah, it's not going to be easy for Manly. But again, I think that threshold, 20 points, will be feeling confident rolling into Sunday, that we don't think the Broncos' defense was an aberration. But we do believe that the Dogs' attack is definitely a work in progress. Again, if you need top sport, we're going to have these players every single week. And the promo code is TryPod to get your account with Toppy. That is going to do it. So catch me in under an hour's time, Winning Mood, the Supercoach and Punting crossover show that I do live with the 2021 champion, Tim Moody. Catch the Padonis and I. We're live every Sunday within 15 minutes of full time to recap the round and the results. Don't forget your comments, chance to win that jersey, but also just let us know your thoughts on the round, your bets, or ask us any questions, share your opinion. We appreciate it. We appreciate you hitting like. We appreciate you following and subscribing where you can. I will just say the AFL actually begins tonight, so don't let that catch you off guard, because TopSport's even priced up a bunch of custom futures AFL multis that were submitted by people in our group. And I want to shout out Eddie Betts, and that's Betts with 1T, who is tipping every week. AFL. He had a great year. He's our top AFL tipster in the group, and he helped submit some of those AFL multis. So you got to check them out, because the AFL season is going to be underway in half an hour, 45 minutes if you're watching this live. So check that out if you're interested. Best of luck for your week ahead. Good luck with your punting, but always do it responsibly, please, guys. And Matthias will send us out with a Lego.
Lego.